The music was so loud the bass thumped inside my chest like a second heartbeat. The dance floor was a spinning blur of champagne glasses and white dresses, and everyone looked beautiful in that easy, careless way people do when they think nothing bad can happen tonight. I was near the edge of the floor in my wheelchair, talking to my cousin Diane, sipping water, just trying to exist quietly without being in anyone's way. That was something I had gotten very good at over the past year. Being small, being quiet, taking up as little space as possible. Then my sister Brooke drifted toward me, her white dress glowing under the lights, her wedding crown beginning to slip sideways. She looked at me the way she always did, like I was a problem she couldn't solve. She looked at my wheelchair like it personally offended her. Then she laughed, sharp and bright, just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "Paige," she said, dragging my name out like a bad joke, "are you really going to sit there all night and perform?" I barely had time to blink. Her hands locked around the handles of my chair. And then she shoved. Hard. The chair lurched forward. One wheel caught the edge of the dance floor, and my body tipped, slowly at first, like the world was deciding whether to let this happen. Then gravity made its choice. I hit the floor. Hip, elbow, shoulder. Pain exploded up my spine like something electric and cruel. For one awful second, the room went completely silent except for the song still playing, muffled, like it was coming from underwater. Brooke stood over me in her wedding dress, smiling like she had just won something. "Stop faking," she said clearly. "You're always faking." People stared. Someone covered their mouth. Someone else laughed nervously, the way people do when they don't know whether they're allowed to be horrified. I turned my head and saw my parents standing 10 feet away. Both of them watching. Neither of them moving. Like this was something that happened in our family all the time. Because, if I am honest, it was. 5 seconds later, someone pushed through the frozen crowd. It was Brooke's groom, Caleb, and the expression on his face told me he had just witnessed something he could not explain away. "My name is Paige Whitaker." And that was the night my sister finally ran out of people willing to pretend. I am 28 years old and I have used a wheelchair for the past 13 months. A truck ran a red light on a Tuesday afternoon and my whole life changed in about 3 seconds. I woke up in a hospital bed unable to feel my legs the way I used to. Doctors used careful words, partial, possible, gradual. What they meant was, maybe. I spent months in rehabilitation learning how to transfer from my bed to my chair, how to breathe through nerve pain, how to smile while people talked to me like I had also lost my mind. On good days, I could stand briefly using a walker. My balance was poor and the pain was real, but I could manage a few shaky seconds upright. My sister Brooke discovered this one afternoon during a therapy session she stopped by unannounced. She turned those few unsteady seconds into her favorite story. "She can walk," Brooke would tell people, her voice warm with false concern. "She just chooses not to." I had heard her say it at family dinners, at birthday parties, on phone calls she didn't know I could hear. Brooke had found the one detail that made people question me, and she held on to it like a weapon she was always just about to use. Brooke has always been the kind of beautiful that makes people forgive her before she even apologizes. Growing up, adults called her spirited, passionate, a lot of personality. When she threw tantrums, my mother said she was feeling deeply. When I cried, my father told me I was being dramatic. Brooke was the golden child, charming, loud, magnetic, and I was the background. I accepted that for most of my childhood because children accept what they are given. But after my accident, when I came home thin and exhausted and learning to navigate a world not built for me, I needed my family in a way I never had before. Instead of rising to meet that need, Brooke competed with it. My injury had shifted the direction of people's attention, and Brooke could not stand that. Every time a family friend stopped to talk to me, Brooke found a reason to redirect the room. Every time someone called me brave, something behind her eyes flickered with something that was not pride. My wheelchair had become, in her mind, the most unfair accessory I had ever owned. And she had decided, quietly and with great determination, to make sure everyone understood that she saw through it. When Brooke got engaged to Caleb 8 months ago, my whole family exploded with excitement. My parents were thrilled in the particular way parents get when one child is doing exactly the thing they always hoped for. I was genuinely happy for her too. Caleb seemed decent, steady and kind, the type of person who looks at you when you are talking. Before the engagement, I had told myself that maybe things would settle down. Maybe a wedding, a new chapter, would soften whatever was hardening between us. Instead, my mother called 3 days after the engagement and at the end of the call, almost as a side note, said, "Just try to keep things light, sweetheart. Stay in the background a little. It's Brooke's time." I held the phone and said nothing for a moment. As if my spine injury has a calendar, I finally said, trying to make it a joke. My mother did not laugh. "Don't make this about you," my father said from somewhere behind her, his voice traveling through the speaker like a warning I had heard 100 times before, in 100 different forms, all of them meaning the same thing: protect Brooke, even when the cost is you. The wedding was beautiful. I will say that honestly because it was true. The venue was warm and golden with candle light, the flowers were white and soft, and Brooke looked genuinely radiant in her dress. I sat in my chair near the back of the ceremony in a spot my mother had quietly arranged for me, close enough to be present but not so central that I might pull focus. I watched my sister walk down the aisle and felt something real and tender for her, some old love from before things became complicated between us. Caleb cried when he saw her. Actual tears, quick and genuine. This man truly loves her, I thought, and I hoped being loved like that would be enough for her. That it would fill whatever hollow place inside her kept reaching for more. The reception was warm and full of laughter. I danced in my own way, moving with the music in my chair, catching up with cousins I hadn't seen in months. For a few hours, it almost felt like before. Like a version of our family existed where everyone was simply glad to be in the same room. I knew by the end of the night that version had never been real. The after party started around 10. The lights dropped lower, the music got louder, and the energy shifted from celebration to something looser and less careful. I stayed near the edge of the dance floor with Diane, watching people move and laugh. That was when Brooke drifted over, cheeks flushed, her wedding crown tilting slowly to one side. She looked at me, then at my chair, with that familiar flicker behind her eyes. "Everyone keeps asking about you," she said, her voice low and pointed. "It's exhausting." I kept my own voice steady. "Asking what?" She shrugged, but the shrug was not relaxed. "If you're okay. If you're so brave." She tilted her head. Maybe I should give them something real to talk about. I did not understand what she meant until her hands closed around the handles of my chair. And even then, in the half-second between her grabbing and the shove, some part of me could not fully believe she would actually do it. She did. And now I was on the floor in front of everyone, pain shooting through my body, while my sister stood over me in her wedding dress and smiled down at me like the whole thing was a joke I was too sensitive to understand. Caleb dropped to his knees beside me before anyone else moved. His hands hovered near me carefully. "Paige, are you hurt? Tell me where." His voice was low and urgent. Brooke laughed from above us, a bright high sound that didn't match anything around it. "She's fine. She does this. It's her whole thing." Caleb looked up at her slowly. "What do you mean, she does this?" Brooke rolled her eyes. "She likes attention. She always has." My elbow throbbed. My hip ached deeply. My spine was sending sharp, hot signals I recognized from the worst weeks of my recovery. A bridesmaid named Fiona appeared beside me, face pale, hands gentle as she helped me back toward my chair. My mother finally moved, not toward me, but toward Brooke. "Honey, maybe." Brooke cut her off with a single look. "Mom. Stop." Like my mother was the embarrassing one. Caleb stayed crouched beside me for a moment longer, his expression changed now. The warmth was still there, but something harder had moved in underneath it. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing inside a story he had never been told, and that the story had been going on for a very long time before he arrived. A few people helped me settle back into my chair. Fiona stayed close. A bartender named Owen, who I had spoken with briefly earlier in the evening, came over quietly and asked if I needed anything. I said I was okay. He nodded but didn't move far. Brooke had drifted back toward her guests, already laughing, her dress sweeping the floor. Already rewriting the evening in her mind. I noticed a few guests watching me with that familiar expression, the one where you can see them deciding what to believe. Brooke had been telling her version of my story for a long time. People had been listening. My cousin Diane pressed my hand. I saw everything, she whispered. That was not an accident. I nodded but said nothing. Because saying it out loud felt dangerous somehow, like agreeing to a fight I hadn't chosen. Then Caleb came back and crouched beside my chair, his voice lower now. Are you all right? Honestly. I looked at him, at the steadiness in his face, the absence of performance. I've been better, I said. Has she done things like this before? He asked quietly. And I realized, sitting there with my elbow still aching, that I had spent years being trained to protect the person who kept hurting me. Later, when the room had thinned and the music softened, a woman sat beside me. Her name was Nadia, Caleb's younger sister. I had met her at the rehearsal dinner and liked her immediately. She was direct and warm and she looked at people when they spoke. She pressed an ice pack toward my arm that she had quietly asked the bar staff to prepare. I saw everything, she said. Including your parents doing nothing. I looked at her steadily. It was a lot to see, I said. Nadia's jaw tightened. Has this happened before? Not tonight specifically, but things like this. I turned the question over. All the smaller moments. The comments at family dinners, the times my chair had been grabbed and called an accident, the time Brooke told our grandmother I was faking nerve pain to skip her charity event. The way my parents had quietly, consistently asked me not to bring things up, not to make it awkward, not to force the issue. I nodded slowly. Nadia closed her eyes briefly. Then she opened them and said, clearly and with intention, I'm going to tell Caleb what I saw. I said nothing. But I did not tell her not to, and that silence was the most honest thing I had managed all night. Brooke found me near the coat room an hour later. She carried 2 glasses of champagne like a peace offering, wearing the soft smile she used when she wanted to seem generous. She sighed, the big, beautiful sigh of someone who has decided to forgive you. Okay, she said, setting 1 glass beside me. I'm sorry you fell. You pushed me, I said. The words came out steady. Brooke's smile stayed fixed. Paige, she said, just loud enough for the guests passing behind me, why are you doing this right now? On my wedding night? I held her gaze and said nothing, because I knew the pattern. The answer didn't matter. The audience did. Then she leaned close, her voice dropping to something only I could hear. If you say 1 word to Caleb, she whispered, I will make your life very difficult. I am not joking. She pulled back, smiled wide and warm, and walked away like she had just handled something minor and forgettable. And I sat there in the noise and the light and understood, maybe for the first time without flinching, that the person I had been protecting all these years had never once worried about protecting me. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Caleb. Nadia gave me your number. Are you okay? Can we talk? I stared at the message. I thought about Brooke's whisper the night before. I thought about my parents' blank, still faces as I lay on the floor. I thought about all the years of making myself smaller to keep a peace that was never actually peace. Then I typed back, yes. I'll meet you. We sat in the hotel lobby an hour later, in a quiet corner near the windows. Caleb looked like he hadn't slept. He held his coffee with both hands and got straight to it. I need to understand what I saw, he said. I told him everything, keeping my voice flat and factual. The comments over the past year. The incidents before last night. The way my parents moved consistently to protect Brooke rather than me. Caleb listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "Do you have documentation? Medical records? Anything?" I told him I had records going back 13 months. I had a written log of incidents with dates and witnesses. I had everything, because somewhere along the way I had stopped hoping things would fix themselves. He asked because he needed to be sure, and I understood that without taking offense. A person discovering something terrible about someone they love needs evidence the way someone waking from a fall needs to check that the ground is actually solid. I told him my physical therapist, Dr. Patel, had records of every appointment and every setback. I told him my neurologist had written clear documentation, that brief standing was not the same as functional mobility, that my pain was real and measurable, and that the words "she can stand briefly" and "she is faking" were not two ways of saying the same thing. I told him I had begun keeping a written record of incidents 6 months ago, when Brooke's behavior shifted from unkind to something more deliberate. Caleb's face changed as I spoke, not with anger yet, but with something heavier. The expression of a person watching a wall come down slowly and knowing they cannot stop it. "She told me you were jealous," he said finally. "That you had always tried to take her attention." I nodded. "I've heard that story for years," I said. "I used to argue with it. I don't anymore. When someone decides a story about you is true, your arguing only makes the story more interesting to them." 2 days after the wedding, the venue manager called me. Her name was Patricia, and she had a calm, grounded voice that I found settling. "I wanted to check in personally," she said. "We filed an incident report the evening of the event. Several guests came forward with their accounts, and I want you to know we take these matters seriously." I sat completely still with the phone against my ear. "Several guests?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "Including a member of the groom's family and one of our staff members." She paused. "We also have security footage from the cameras near the dance floor." I put my hand flat on my kitchen table. Not from fear, from the particular, unfamiliar sensation of reality showing up on my side for once. I asked Patricia to preserve everything. She told me it was already flagged and secured. When I hung up, I sat in the morning quiet of my apartment and allowed myself to feel something I had not felt in a long time. It was not victory yet. It was smaller than that but more solid. It was proof. Real, time-stamped, physical proof that what had happened to me had actually happened, not something I had dramatized, not something I had invented. Something real, witnessed and recorded. Brooke called that evening. Her voice was too fast and too high, the control cracking around the edges. She had clearly heard about the incident report. "What did you tell the venue?" she demanded. "I told them what happened," I said. "You're trying to destroy my marriage before it starts," she said. Her voice cracked on the word marriage. "Brooke," I said calmly, "I didn't call them. They called me." Silence. Then, "Caleb is asking questions because of you." "Caleb is asking questions because he was there," I said. I heard her breathing change, faster, sharper. "I'll tell everyone you provoked it," she said. "That you've been doing this since the accident and you finally went too far." "There's footage," I said. Another silence. Longer this time. Then her voice dropped to something cold and controlled. "You think this makes you the good person. But you are destroying our family." I listened carefully to those words. She did not say, "I didn't do it." She did not say, "You're lying." She said, "You are destroying our family." And I understood then that for Brooke, her actions and their consequences had never been connected in her mind. What she did was simply what she did. What I did in response was the real problem. Caleb requested the security footage from the venue the following day without telling Brooke first. Nadia called to let me know. She said Caleb had watched it alone in the hotel room and had played it more than once. He watched Brooke's hands close around the handles of my chair. He watched the shove. He watched me hit the floor. He watched Brooke stand over me smiling, her mouth forming the word "stop faking," clear enough to read without sound. He watched my parents standing 10 feet away, completely still. Nadia said he went very quiet afterward. Not a loud or dramatic quiet, a deep one, the kind that comes when a person is reorganizing something fundamental inside themselves. When he finally spoke, he had only one question. "How long has this been happening to Paige?" Nadia told him what she had witnessed herself. She told him about the comments she had noticed at family events over the past several months. The casual put-downs, the ways Brooke turned conversations about my recovery into opportunities to cast doubt. She told him about the pattern she had observed but stayed quiet about, waiting, hoping she was reading it wrong. Caleb listened to all of it, and then he sat for a long time without saying anything at all. Brooke arranged a family meeting 4 days after the wedding. She did it the way she arranged everything. Smoothly, with just enough trembling in her voice to make refusing feel unkind. My parents, 2 aunts, my grandparents, and I all gathered in my parents' living room on a gray Thursday afternoon. Brooke sat in the center of the couch like she was holding court. She spoke first. "I am truly hurt," she began, "that after everything, after my own wedding, Paige is trying to turn my husband against me." Her voice broke beautifully. "She has always been this way. Since the accident, it has gotten worse. She wants sympathy. She wants to be the center of every room." My aunt murmured my name softly, like a question. I felt the old panic try to rise in my chest, the instinct to over-explain, to apologize, to shrink until the room relaxed. Instead, I said one plain sentence: "Watch the footage." Brooke's tears stopped. Not gradually. Immediately. Like a switch being thrown. One moment, grief. The next, nothing but stillness. And even my grandmother, who had adored Brooke her entire life, blinked at that abrupt stillness like she was seeing something for the very first time. They watched the footage on my father's laptop, the screen turned so everyone in the room could see. I watched them watch it. My mother's hand rose slowly to cover her mouth. My grandfather leaned forward, face going hard. My aunt made a quiet sound. My father sat rigid, jaw set, eyes fixed on the screen with an expression I had never seen on him before. When it ended, the room was silent. Then Brooke uncrossed her arms and said, flat and matter-of-fact, "So?" She wasn't seriously hurt. Caleb's voice was quiet and even. He had arrived midway through the viewing, slipping in through the front door. "You pushed her." Brooke's chin lifted. She needed to stop making everything about her wheelchair. My mother whispered her name gently, like a warning. Brooke turned on her immediately. "Don't. You always baby her and act surprised when she uses it." I looked at my mother then. I watched her face move through grief, guilt, confusion, and then I watched her start to reach toward Brooke. To comfort. To smooth. To protect. And I understood with tired, final clarity that proof alone was not my problem. My family's sense of themselves as good parents depended on me being the difficult one. If I was telling the truth, their whole story collapsed. Nadia told me privately, over coffee 2 days later, that there was something I had not been told. Before Brooke and Caleb had dated a woman named Iris for 2 years. He had loved her seriously and she had been grounded and kind. Then Brooke entered his life, and within a few months, Iris was gone. The story that spread was that Iris had been unstable, that she had attacked Brooke at an event and caused a scene. Caleb had believed it because Brooke had cried and people around her confirmed her account. Iris had stopped trying to explain herself and left. Now, Nadia told me, Caleb had quietly reached out to Iris and apologized. Iris told him the truth, she had not attacked Brooke. Brooke had deliberately spilled wine on her and then cried for help. The witnesses had simply believed the woman in tears. I held my coffee and let that information settle inside me slowly. She learned how to do this somewhere, I said finally. Nadia nodded. Yeah, she said. She had very good teachers. We both sat with that, what it said about Brooke, what it said about our parents, and how long the pattern had been running before anyone decided to look at it honestly. My physical therapist Dr. Patel wrote a formal note at Caleb's request. She explained what my injury involved. That partial standing ability does not mean functional walking, that spinal nerve injuries cause pain invisible to bystanders but measurable clinically, and that the fall at the reception had caused a documented setback. Increased nerve pain. New bruising over healing tissue. Regression in months of progress. She used the word faking once. Accusations of faking are not only medically inaccurate in Ms. Whitaker's case, but are actively harmful to her rehabilitation outcomes. My father read the note. I was in the room. I watched his face change, not with empathy first, but with fear. Because the note meant that everything they had quietly believed about me, that I was exaggerating, that I was dramatic, that things couldn't be as serious as I claimed, was not a difference of interpretation. It was factually wrong. Being wrong in that specific, documented way meant the story they had told themselves about being reasonable, caring parents had a hole in it they could no longer close. He set the note on the table. He did not say anything for a long time. Neither did I. Some silences are more honest than anything words could manage. Brooke escalated because that was what she always did when control slipped. She called Caleb and told him that if he loved her, he would stop speaking to me. That my presence was poisoning their marriage before it had a chance. That choosing to believe me was a betrayal she could not recover from. Caleb came to my apartment after that call, looking exhausted in a way that went deeper than sleep. She wants me to cut contact with you, he said. I know, I said. Are you going to? He looked at me steadily. I already told her I wouldn't, he said. She said that meant I was choosing you over her. He paused. Then she said something I haven't been able to stop hearing. I waited. She said you weren't really disabled, he said quietly. That the wheelchair was your way of controlling people. The apartment was very still. I nodded. She's been saying some version of that for over a year, I said. Caleb shook his head. Hearing it out loud, about someone I watched get pushed onto the floor. He stopped. Then, I don't think I know who I married. His voice didn't carry anger when he said it. It carried something worse, the hollow sound of a person finally telling themselves the truth. Caleb called both families together on a Saturday afternoon. It felt deliberate, not a confrontation but something final. Brooke arrived in a pale blue dress, chin held at the angle she used when performing confidence. My parents sat together on the sofa. Nadia stood near the window. I positioned myself near the door. Caleb stood in the center of the room and spoke without raising his voice. I can't stay married to someone who does what I watched on that footage, he said. Brooke's mouth curved into a disbelieving smile. You're being dramatic. Paige manipulated you. I watched the footage, Caleb said. I read the doctor's note. I spoke with Iris. Brooke's face went still at that last name. I've spent 2 weeks trying to find a reason to stay, Caleb continued. Not because I wanted to leave, because I loved you and I wanted a reason. He paused. Then you told me Paige wasn't really disabled. And I understood, this isn't a mistake made under pressure. This is what you believe. This is who you are when you think no one will hold you to account. My mother cried quietly. My father stared at the carpet. Brooke stared at Caleb like she genuinely could not understand why her performance had stopped working. Brooke's control broke in that room in front of every person whose opinion had ever mattered to her. She had performed her whole life, performed grief, generosity, victimhood with breathtaking precision. But what happened in that living room was different. She snapped. She deserved it. Brooke's voice came out high and raw and exposed. She has been soaking up sympathy since the accident and I am sick of it. She takes everything, the attention, the concern, and I get nothing. I am made into the villain for wanting one single day, she caught herself, breathing hard. The room was completely silent. Then Caleb said, very quietly, "Thank you." Brooke blinked. That is exactly what I needed to hear. My grandmother had her hand pressed to her mouth. My aunt had looked away. My father looked up from the carpet, and what was on his face was not irritation or exhaustion. It was shame, plain, uncomplicated shame. Caleb turned to the room and said steadily, "I'm filing for annulment." And I watched my sister's world crack open right there in the middle of all the people she had spent her entire life performing for. She had pushed me down to hold herself up. And the floor had finally given way beneath her. After Caleb left, my mother came toward me with shaking hands and eyes full of tears. "Paige," she whispered. "We didn't know it was this bad." I looked at her carefully. "You watched it happen," I said. "You were 10 feet away." My father's voice came out low and rough. "We thought you'd manage. You've always been so strong." "I'm not always strong," I said. "I was on the floor at my sister's wedding. I've been managing cruelty for over a year because every time I said something, you asked me not to make things worse." My mother flinched. "We were trying to keep the peace," she said. And there it was. The sentence I had been circling for years. I said, slowly and clearly, "The peace you kept was Brooke's comfort. You paid for it with my dignity. Every time." My father's eyes filled. I could see him reaching for something, some appeal to family, some version of "but she's still your sister." I leaned back in my chair and met his eyes. "I was your daughter," I said. "I needed you and you chose her comfort over my safety." No one spoke. Because there was simply no honest defense for it, not one that held any weight. Weeks passed. Brooke moved back into my parents' house, blaming everyone. My parents called and asked me to come home, to help heal things, to be the bigger person they had always relied on me to be. I did not go. Not to punish them, but because I finally understood the difference between forgiveness and returning to a place that has not changed. Caleb sent me a message one quiet evening. "Thank you for not disappearing when things got hard. I'm sorry it cost you so much." I read it twice. I thought about Nadia and the ice pack. I thought about Diane holding my hand in the noise. I thought about all the years spent quietly asking to be believed. Real justice is not a single dramatic moment. It is quieter, a groom watching footage alone, a grandmother blinking when tears stop too fast, a father going still in front of a doctor's note. I didn't get revenge. I built a boundary so solid it spoke for me. Brooke pushed me out of my wheelchair to prove I was pretending. But she was the one performing all along. And the man she chose to build her life with walked away. Not because of me. Because of her. I didn't get even. I got free.